This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 247 of the CineSnob Podcast. As I knock into my desk, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
It's very precarious here, and I smacked into the desk with the chair, and it looked like everything was about to fall down. Which
Just
would
like
have been
one of those videos where like a forklift operator like bumps into like a row of things and it just all comes collapsing.
Yeah. I was thinking a little smaller scale, like when there's some kid trying to do a flip and then they end up kicking their phone across the room. But
It's a good one.
I'm not forklift certified, so whatever that meme is that is going around.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
that's right.
Whatever the kids are talking about.
Operator.
Yeah. How's it been, Cody? It's been a while since we've had a show.
Yeah, it's been good. I've been a busy boy, busy bee, traveling and got some more travel coming up. So,
Are you traveling for a specific purpose or just to travel?
Just to travel, really. Just hanging out in different spots in the country and going to New York this week. So
Now, you are going, and while your beloved Astros are in the World Series,
yeah. I had planned my trip around. So we planned the trip a couple months ago, and I was planning stuff around potential World Series games because that schedule is out like the year in advance. And then yesterday's game got postponed, which pushed the entire schedule forward, which fucked up all of my plans that I had scheduled. So I'm scrambling to try and, redo it here.
Speaking of, this past weekend in San Antonio was the big Elton John concert.
Yeah, heard about that.
My wife and my mom went, and apparently it was a big ordeal to get into, traffic wise. One thing I did realize, looking at the tour shirt that my wife brought home, is there was at one point a game a concert scheduled for Minute Maid Park on the 4th, which I heard was canceled.
Yes.
Because of the World Series, which I find that that's crazy to me that MLB couldn't possibly accommodate that thing. But then I thought about it, I guess it would just destroy the field.
Yeah, well, that was a problem earlier in the year where there was a concert at Minute Maid Park. I think it was Bad Bunny, and it fucked up the field bad. And there were giant patches. They had to redo the field and stuff like that. So, that's the big problem with it. The other thing, though, that MLB is a little bit responsible for, well, actually, I don't know, because the reason why is this concert tour was booked a long time in advance. Right. And then there was an MLB lockout, which pushed the start of the season forward, which pushed the World Series into November. And typically speaking, the World Series ends in October. And so what ended up happening was, it got pushed back. And I guess Elton John's people didn't think to push it. I don't know. Or maybe the itinerary was already set and they couldn't move it. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, they do have two other giant arenas. Still, I mean, there's Toyota Center and then there's NRG Stadium. I mean, it feels like one of those would have been open.
Right.
I can't, because my wife is a huge Elton John fan. This is the second time she's seen him, and my mom had been waiting her whole life to see Elton John, essentially, and for it to be canceled because the World Series got pushed, and then might not even. So, is there even going to be a game played on the 4th in Houston now?
No, that's going to be a travel day.
Okay, so it was essentially, well, I guess it's not canceled for nothing because they would still screw up the field, but
yeah, I mean there was supposed to be one, yes,
right,
but now there's not going to be.
It's got to be a real pain in the ass if you're a Houston-based Elton John fan, because your choice was to come to San Antonio last week, and I don't know how much tickets went for. I know face value they were very expensive. I can't imagine what secondary market was leading up to it, especially after the cancellation of that Houston show.
Yeah.
There were 50,000 people there, I read, and I mean that's $500 million in ticket sales, something like that. So anyway, crazy. But speaking of that, this past weekend, I managed to make it downtown in San Antonio there amongst the mess to host some more panels at Big Texas Comic-Con, which is always a lot of fun. This year, I was supposed to do the Jason David Frank panel. Mm-hmm. I won't speak to some of it, but you and I interviewed Jason David Frank years ago for Wizard World.
Yes.
Very, very accommodating with his time, I think. Very nice guy. A tad more aggressive this time, a tad more focused on things that were... He has a movie coming out that's a Power started as a fan film, a Power Rangers fan film, and then they morphed it into some sort of original IP. Man, I don't know. He talked about that for like 5 minutes, and then just blew past me. Didn't need a panel host. I don't know. Not the Jason David Frank I remember, but
yeah,
Anyway, I also hosted the panel featuring a guy named James Jude Courtney, who plays Michael Myers in the latest Halloween films. Really surprising panel because he's an actor / stuntman, but he was like so much about like the craft of acting that it really kind of blew me away.
Yeah,
like, he was like not bothered at all that he was playing Michael Myers, like the fact that he's playing this iconic villain, and just the idea that he's stepping into someone else's shoes. Like he didn't care anything about that. Lots of nice things to say about David Gordon Green, who directed the film. I haven't seen any of those new Halloween movies, so I have no like bearing on anything. But
I've seen the first one.
I know this last one was not well received.
Yeah. Oddly enough, though, John Carpenter really liked it, which is weird.
Well, I mean, hasn't he been directly involved each time?
He's done the music for him, but that's it. He's not creatively involved in the movie itself.
I thought he was like kind of a George Lucas, where they just sort of get him to come to set and say like, "This is cool."
No, he did. He couldn't care less about that.
I guess
he's a really fun interview to listen and watch because, like, someone asked, I think they asked him like what his favorite of the Halloween movies, and I think he said something to the effect of like it's the next one because a giant check arrived, or some shit like that.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a fun one. The next day, I did the panel for Dante Bosco, who I know from Hook, played the character of Rufio. Much to my surprise, and I guess, I mean, I had researched obviously some, but the panel was 99% about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Nickelodeon cartoon series that I've never seen, but I know it has a very devoted fan base. He was a great guy to talk to. Part of these things that always sort of baffles me, and I don't know why I'm surprised by it, but the sincerity with which like the crowd approaches these things, like the people there, and it's a safe space for this kind of thing, but like the raw emotion that people display about meeting someone who starred in a cartoon that they liked, it's always sort of touching. And I obviously they handle it, he handles it gracefully, and I'm sure it's something that happens city to city, but man, some people are really touched by the things you would least expect in art. There was, for example, a few years ago, I hosted Jaleel White's panel. Obviously, Steve Urkel is the gist of that, but he was also the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog in the cartoon series that ran in the 90s. And there was a girl that like came up crying, talking about how much Sonic the Hedgehog had changed her life. I'm like, who would have ever thought that this garbage throwaway cartoon that somebody cranked out would have some sort of impact on someone like that?
Yeah.
It's just, it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. And hopefully, someday we get people coming up to us and telling us how much this show meant to them, and we inspired a generation of film critics, and
yes, There was a very a nice sweet moment like that where there was a younger girl, probably early teens, who asked James Jude Courtney. She goes, "What's your favorite horror movie?" And he told her his answer was the original Frankenstein. And he finished up, and then she said, "What about you?" and asked me, and I was completely caught off guard. I was like, "Poltergeist." That's my answer, because it is my answer. But it blew me away that somebody gave a shit about what the dumb host thinks. And then the last panel I did was Billy West, voiceover artist, who is delightfully weird, and sort of a crazy person. Lots of fun to talk to. For me personally, a big fan of Ren and Stimpy when I was an early teenager. Kind of the precursor to all these adult cartoons that are out there. Then, of course, Futurama, which I loved the first time around. I wasn't so big on the reboot. I'm curious to see how the second reboot goes.
Yeah. I think my big Billy West hallmark is Doug for me.
Oh, yes. He did talk about Doug quite a bit.
Nice.
Was he the voice of Doug, of Disney's Doug, too?
I don't think that he was.
Because my familiarity with Doug ends at Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
I know everybody hates Disney Doug.
Yeah, Disney Doug was bad. I'm trying to see if I can look at this real quick. Yeah, it was a different voice for Disney.
He was also notably not part of the Spike TV reboot of Beavis and Butthead. Excuse me, not Beavis and Butthead. Ren and Stimpy. A few years ago. He was very adamant about not being part of that because he felt like it was
you know what's Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say what's funny is that when the Doug thing happened, everyone returned except for Billy West.
That's crazy. Yeah, he's very was very passionate about not doing it and the things that he won't do. He is, like I said, he's kind of a delightfully cracked person. Anyway, the other panel, one other thing I wanted to mention, there was a Scream panel featuring Jamie Kennedy, Skeet Ulrich, and Matthew Lillard.
Yeah.
The biggest crowd I've seen at one of these events. My old colleague, Emily Bauckham from News 4 WAI, was supposed to host it. And they were like, "No, we got this." And they just sort of like went and asked their own questions, but they were very polite to her and like brought her in also because normally they don't have anybody to do that. But yeah, the crowd went crazy for the Scream guys. And I don't know why I was shocked, but I was shocked that it was such a massive, massive crowd there.
Yeah. Well, I am a little curious to know if that new one kind of reinvigorated that franchise a little bit and created some old interest, especially because it was like directly connected.
Yeah, I've heard that. I still haven't watched it yet.
Oh, really?
I was trying to avoid spoilers, and then I was listening to the panel. I was like, crap. But Matthew Lillard has the whole Scooby-Doo thing going on, too. Not sure what Skeet Ulrich has been up to.
Jamie Kennedy's in a bunch of right-wing movies these days, so...
Is he?
Cool.
I thought he was just sort of like he made that Heckler movie.
Yeah. So the thing with Jamie Kennedy that's super interesting is that, and it's actually a really interesting interview if you ever take the time to follow it. But he was in a movie about Roe versus Wade.
I did read this. I think.
And there was this journalist who was like, "Hey, what's up with this?" And Jamie tried to act like he didn't know the history of things and that he was just taking on an acting role. And then, the interviewer kind of grilled him on the responsibility of it all. And it's fascinating to read him like squirm. It's very uncomfortable, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, I do remember that he was, he kind of became the face of that for some reason. Oh by the way, I'm looking at the cast of this movie and it is bonkers.
Yep.
So not only do we have Jamie Kennedy, but we have Stacey Dash, we have Joey Lawrence. We have John Voight, of course.
Yep.
Tommy Lahren, Corbin Burnson, John Schneider, which I sent you a hilarious clip of his movie the other day. William Forsythe, who I feel like, hey man, that dude's just cashing a check. Steve Guttenberg, Milo Yiannopoulos,
and then it gets really good after that.
Mike Lindell. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Is there nobody that like why? There's got to be some like these guys reach out to Chris Pratt, like just hoping that his like politics takes over and he takes one of these roles. But there's no like mainstream on the rise or at the top of their game actor that will touch one of these fucking things.
Yeah.
Oh, so sad. Hey, but Jamie Kennedy looked great, by the way. Like he still looked the same. And I was somewhat fond of the Jamie Kennedy experiment back in the day.
Yeah. Did that predate Punk'd or was Punk'd after that? Or was was Punk'd before that?
I don't know. That's a good question. Because Jamie Kennedy's X was 2002. Punk'd was 2003. So yeah, it did predate that.
Interesting.
There was a one I remember where he like staged a concert, like a fake concert at some like beach, and he only like it was only word of mouth that Creed was going to be playing. And then it came out and he was like Victor Creed, Kreed or something stupid like that. And the audience was pissed. Oh, the early 2000s. How I miss it.
Yeah.
Playing my GameCube and watching the Jamie Kennedy experiment. So that was fun. Again, thanks to the folks at Big Texas Comic-Con for having me. They always kind of say, here's your choice of panels to host, and I pick up stuff that is harder to book people for, like early Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. So anyway, anything else before we move on, Cody?
No, let's go ahead and move on to our a little bit of a light week, right?
Yeah. We've only got one movie this week, so let's go ahead and move on to reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
This week we have Weird, the Al Yankovic Story.
I'm tired of people thinking I'm some kind of joke.
Your dad and I agreed it would be best if you just stop being who you are and doing the things you love.
My whole life, all I wanted.
I'm afraid we found your son at a polka party.
Just to make up new words to a song that already exists.
Oh, well, you should do that then.
Ooh, my little hungry one, open up a package of my banana.
Dude, I've got chills.
Every once in a great while, I can spot a talent that I know is the future of music. But first, we gotta find you a stage name. Al Yankovic. It's long, it's hard to pronounce. So I'm just gonna throw this out there. Weird Al Yankovic. I love it.
So this is a, quote, biopic of Weird Al Yankovic. I feel like I should have probably recused myself from this, but
yeah.
Someone I've been a fan of since I was a child. Someone I saw in concert 3 months ago, back in July. But yeah, this is a biopic, and it's a I don't think it's right to call it a parody of a biopic, because it's not like your Naked Gun style parody.
Right, but it is sort of like a parody in the way of like Walk Hard is sort of like a parody of a musical biopic. So like touching on tropes rather than like,
it's not just like jokes in your face, like weird send up stuff. But Cody, tell us about Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, and what you thought of it.
Yeah, so I'll leave a lot of the commentary to you as the resident expert here on Weird Al.
Thank you.
I did listen to Weird Al as a kid, and I remember owning the Running with Scissors album when I was a kid, and listening before that as well, of course. In terms of like the more visual elements of Weird Al, I don't have that familiarity. Like I've never seen UHF.
Really?
Yeah. And so I am curious to hear from you as to like if there's any of that DNA within this, but yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a you know, it's not a difficult movie to describe. It's essentially you know, framed as a biopic of Weird Al, but you know, everything in it is very clearly not, you know, not true. You know, to the point, you know, so it goes through Al's childhood, you know, and he's forbidden to play accordion, and you know, and then he grows up and tries to form a band, and then you know, kind of nobody understands him, and then it escalates to like greater and greater ridiculousness involving you know, a relationship with Madonna, some involvement with Pablo Escobar, and kind of goes from there. So, you know, it's interesting because I actually think my favorite part of this movie is like the first act of the movie, where it's like Al's childhood, because I think it really hammers home like kind of the silliness of this being a biopic, and you know, you run into the tropes of like, you know, instead of him going to like a forbidden punk rock party, he's going to like a polka party,
right?
Where Scott Aukerman as a cop shows up, as you can see in that clip there. And I really like to play on those tropes. I like to play on him like getting radio airplay, and then I think there's a pretty funny joke in there regarding rewriting history, I guess we'll say, in terms of one of his most famous songs.
Oh yeah, it's a very blatant, like, no, this is how it happened.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention to anything else.
Yeah, and I think that part is very funny. I think that my main issue, I think, is that it's very like one note, I think, where like it's kind of like just once you've established the joke of it all, I think it just kind of hits that over and over again. And I do think that the middle of the movie is a little bit flabby, and I think that it kind of runs out of steam a little bit towards the middle section and towards the third act, you know, as things really like escalate to ridiculous heights. You know, I think that Daniel Radcliffe is fun in the role, and I like seeing a very committed and funny performance from him. There is it's cameo city. Basically, yes. Anyone who's anyone in the comedy world who has some sort of, you know, affinity for Weird Al or has spoken positively of him in the past appears in the movie.
There's a pool party scene that's just full of, and some of them are pretty golden. Like Paul F. Tompkins playing Gallagher is probably my favorite of all.
That he gets a great punctuation point at the end of that too. That's very funny.
Yeah, and you get Conan O'Brien and Emo Phillips doing some weird stuff. Yorma Tacone as Pee Wee Herman.
Dimitri Martin as Tiny Tim.
Yeah, Akiva Schaffer as Alice Cooper. Yeah, the Gallagher the Gallagher thing really drives me up. The David Desmalchin cameo that was killer.
That was probably the funniest. The thing I laughed the hardest at was that sort of that exchange that they have when he introduces himself. So the thing about it and I think this is kind of punctuated by the way that it's kind of edited, where there's a lot of moments where it fades to black and like resets itself, almost as if this is designed to be like a web series that is in like a Quibi, if you will. And it's interesting because it's a Funny or Die production, and it sort of plays itself in these chapters. And I almost think that would have been a better way to do this. I feel like, you know, this feels like either like a video web series, or maybe like something that would have existed on Funny or Die as like an extended trailer where you like get the point from the trailer.
Well, I mean, it essentially did. Do you remember this?
Was that the Paul Rudd thing?
No. Aaron Paul.
Aaron Paul, that's right. Yeah.
I believe Eric Apple, who directed this, actually directed that too.
Yeah.
Because that was about 10 or 12 years ago, I believe. Yeah. Man, when was that? Hold on, I'm trying to find it in his IMDb, if that's indeed what happened. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially how this got its start.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was called Weird: The Al Yankovic Story.
Yeah.
And it starred Aaron Paul, and it was directed. Yeah, it was directed by Eric Apple. It had Olivia Wilde and Mary Steenburgen in it too.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia Wilde played Madonna.
Okay.
Patton Oswalt played Dr. Demento. So yeah, this thing was like, its genesis was all of this.
Yeah, and I vaguely remember that now that you say that, but that's what it feels like this lives in, which is like something where in short form, like having all these celebrity cameos and having like the different chapters of his life, like it feels like it's meant to exist in a short form format. And I think when spread out into a full length movie, I do think that it starts to wear a little bit thin. I think that I laughed a lot in the beginning and I laughed a lot at the end. And I think it's got this middle chunk problem that I feel like could have either been cut down on or like not go to the same well of the same joke over and over again. But also once you see that it's doing this thing where it's kind of like, playing on music biopic tropes and then like telling things that are like outrageously, not true. I just think that the premise wears a little bit thin. So, I think there's a lot to like in it, but for me, I feel like it maybe should have existed in a different format.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree to a certain point. I think I do think it's kind of flabby narratively. Like it's not the tightest narrative that probably was available, but you do have I think it plays it a little more straight than I would have ultimately preferred. Sorry, I just threw myself out there. You mentioned UHF, which is of course the last movie that Weird Al wrote and starred in back in 1989. You asked if this had any of the same DNA, and it for sure does. And UHF is a movie that plays kind of in chunks. Mm-hmm. And it's, I guess by design, because it's about a TV station. So there's little chunks like this is the Conan the Librarian sketch, and this is the Stanley Spadowski's Clubhouse, and et cetera, moving on like that. There's a through line that connects everything. It's not like an anthology movie or anything. It's not like that, but it is definitely kind of episodic. Mm-hmm. This, like you said, plays a little bit like that, and I wonder if that's just his writing style coming through. This does have, again, some of the same kind of tropes. The scene in Colombia. Is it Colombia? Where was Pablo Escobar? That was Colombia, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Colombia, where he kind of goes on this paramilitary mission. Like there's a scene like that in UHF. It's a dream sequence, but there's the exact same scene. It's a Rambo parody. Mm-hmm. So that DNA is there definitely. I don't think that. And one other thing that may be a strike against it, if you've been a fan of Weird Al for a long time, this is not the first time this has kind of come into play. I mentioned the short starring Aaron Paul from years ago, but there was also a Behind the Music from VH1 mm-hmm. that was notoriously played up for fakeness too. Mm-hmm. So this isn't the first go around with this sort of idea. I think this is probably the most fun, just because it's like a playground for, like the cameos are really fun, and there's some weird liberties taken, pun not intended, me saying weird, but, like the idea that a certain giant song didn't exist before mm-hmm. Al wrote what was the parody of it. And then, man, the movie really does a number on Madonna, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, this is a big swing to take at Madonna. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm a Weird Al mark. I enjoyed it a lot. I know it's not perfect, just like UHF, but anytime it comes on, I'll watch it. I don't know. I guess I'd have to turn on Roku TV, but there's a lot to like. As I don't really, ultimately, I don't really believe that's the point. And that may be to its detriment, but so long as you're kind of enjoying the little things that come along, I do wish, again, no pun intended, I do wish it got a little more weird sometimes.
Yeah.
Like there are some things that are like, there's the last scene that Rainn Wilson's Dr. Demento has is delightfully weird.
Mm-hmm.
I keep saying weird, but it's a fun, like, strange moment that I wish happened more in the movie.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, there's some supporting stuff that I really like. I think I really like Toby Huss in the movie.
He's great.
There's a very funny like line delivery he has towards the end of the movie when they're at a kitchen table.
Yes, yeah.
That's very funny. And also the way this movie ends is very, very funny.
Yes, yeah. The ending is quite hilarious, and it's a joke that goes through the credits. And also watch through the entire credits. Well, there is like a mid-credits stinger, of course. But yes, the movie ends very sincerely. I feel like there's another movie that did this years ago. Like that started the credits in the middle.
Oh, that was Vice.
Vice?
Yeah, the Dick Cheney movie.
Oh, yes. I was thinking Inherent Vice for some reason.
Oh, yeah. No, that's where it ended. It said like Dick Cheney something, and then it just ended.
Yeah.
Or the credits started rolling. But again, like there's touches like that, which I honestly think that end maybe like rescues it a bit, because that is like a weird thing that is a very silly joke that the whole movie just ends on.
Yes.
And I think it's one of those things where like, okay, that's a funny swing to take.
It's also referenced in a new song that Weird Al performs over the credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I think it's just a mixed bag for me. I mean, again, I wish that it was like a little bit tighter, and I wish that it didn't go to the same well of jokes over and over again, because I think like once you see it escalated once, I don't think it gains anything by continuing to escalate, like going from like Madonna to Pablo Escobar and stuff like that. I think the joke is a little bit run into the ground by that point. But I disagree a little bit. I don't think it escalates too much. I think by the time you get to the Pablo Escobar stuff, it's suitably escalated. Mm-hmm. I think there's some funny jokes in there, like this sort of whirlwind romance with Madonna that has only lasted 6 hours. Mm-hmm. Like I said, Madonna gets really dragged through the mud in this a little bit more than I anticipated. I mean, I enjoyed it more than I didn't. I'd like to give it a rewatch once I can watch it without a giant watermark on the screen. I feel like it might have distracted a little bit from the visual humor that was there. This was a big watermark this time around, yeah.
This is a big, very opaque watermark.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, it was. It wasn't really opaque. It was kind of like hard to see through.
That's what opaque means.
I thought opaque meant it was easier to see through.
No. Opacity is the level of which...
that's what I'm doing. I'm thinking about the low end of opacity.
Yeah. Sorry. Anyway.
Excuse me, I'm thinking in Photoshop terms right now.
Yes, yeah. That's exactly where my opacity comes from. Anyway,
So,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to give a wrap up.
What's your grade for Weird, the Al Yankovic Story, Cody?
Yeah, so I'm going to give it a little bit of a pass and give it a B- and just say it's enjoyable enough to recommend that someone watches. I think that if you're a fan of Weird Al, you will appreciate it more than if you're not. I don't know if the audience who's like uninitiated and knows like the discrepancy between who he really is and what you're seeing in these scenes, I think is a lot funnier when you know that about him. Like a very fan. Like I think I told you this story, but I was listening to this podcast with it was the Scott Aukerman and Adam Scott like REM podcast, and they were talking about I think one of the guys from REM was talking about like being backstage with Weird Al, and they all started passing around like tequila shots, and the guy goes, and Al just excused himself from the room.
I do remember actually sitting next to Scott Aukerman at, what was it, Baby Driver?
Mm-hmm.
And him and Doug Benson talking about just how there was some story they were telling about Al to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and how he was just too nice for whatever was happening.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of stories that, like, are great to hear, like, as someone who's a fan, because you never want to hear, like, someone's dark side. But this is clearly a joke. You're right. And, like, I am curious how this plays to somebody who has no idea. I don't think they're watching the movie, frankly, though, if you have no idea. But, you know, because the movie paints him as the biggest star in the world in the 80s. And
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll give it a B-. Yeah.
I'm gonna go with in my heart, I know it's a B, but because I'm a Mark and a fan, I'm gonna give it a B+. Just because I think it's one of those things that's kind of comforting, kind of like how I felt about after what was it, Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Yeah.
Where I was just happy to be hanging around with these people again all these years later. But yeah, I mean, a B+ is where I'm at. You know, it's like I said, I wish it were leaned into the strangeness of everything that it kind of dances around sometimes. Like, by the way, at the end, there's an actor who is presumably playing Coolio.
Yeah.
Which I didn't see the name in the credits. I was trying to figure out who that was, if it was someone like a cameo, because it was so quick I couldn't tell who it was.
I think most of the ones that were quick were not anyone too big.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what always gets me when I'm watching. I was like, because I didn't know who like played Alice Cooper until I watched the credits. So, anyway, I still think Paul F. Tompkins as Gallagher is my funniest cameo. So.
Yeah, and it's a very he has like one line and then one action in the movie.
Yeah, and he's dressed as Gallagher, like in a mime shirt, and the Salvador Dali Andy Warhol thing with Conan and Emo Phillips is so strange.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't quite understand why it was subtitled, but by the way, I've seen. He's so fucking fun. Whoop! I just lost you.
Yeah, you cut out on my
You're
end.
frozen. Damn it.
Can you hear me now?
We'll wait. You back?
I've been here the whole time.
We just lost you for a second. Well, I lost you, so, and I lost myself too. Anyway, Emo Phillips is fucking hilarious, but that's all I had. All right, that's it for this week, Cody. Anything happening next week?
Wakanda Forever.
Oh, yes, I forgot.
Yeah, that'll be coming out the 11th. So, yeah, by the time this is out, that'll be our next show.
Yeah, and then you know what we didn't cover and that we covered last time was is this Enola Holmes 2?
Oh,
is that being released?
I don't know what the date on that is.
Looks like it was this past Friday.
Really?
Which I wouldn't have known. Oh wait, sorry, November 4th, this Friday.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, well, we're not. Maybe we'll cover it. Maybe we'll pick it up if we feel so inclined. Because I remember being fairly fond of the first Enola Holmes.
I don't really remember it that well.
I just remember Henry Cavill and was it Guy Pearce? Is it Guy Pearce? I don't remember.
I don't know, but Henry Cavill movie star.
Henry Cavill movie star. Don't you
television.
dare think he's a television star. I don't know. Anyway, if you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. You can find us on Twitter at CineSnob, Facebook CineSnobNet, youtube.com/CineSnob. Cody, are you still doing the ramble these days?
Yeah, I've been a little bit absent recently due to some travel and other things, but the ramble's still going without me, so you can find it wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah. I need to switch over to Spotify to get my podcasts, I think.
Oh, yeah?
It is
Just
kind of
so
a
you
trip.
can get Rogan and everything in one place?
Well, I hate the Apple Podcast app.
I use Pocket Cast. That's my app of choice.
It is kind of a trip being able to search your own name on Spotify and see content. I wish we got paid for it. That would rock.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what would we get? Like 1/10 of a cent? So,
yeah.
We're not Taylor Swift up in this motherfucker. So, not yet.
No.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. Anything else before we go?
No. I think we're good.
All right. On that note, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit cinesnob.net. See you next week.